Joined now by the Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy. Hello to you, Mr. Lammy. Thank you
Hello.
for joining us on the programme. He was working really hard. It was the middle of a global pandemic. He took 10 minutes out. What's wrong with that?
Okay, the rules were clear that you couldn't have a party of more than two people, a social gathering of more than two people indoors. What we know is that 30 people gathered, that his wife was there, and that the interior designer was there as well. If it was my birthday and my wife and an interior designer rocked up at work, there was Christmas cake, or birthday cake and a celebration, it breaches the rules. And the serious side of this is that at this time, the Queen wasn't having a birthday party. Boris had tweeted just a few weeks earlier a young 7-year-old girl who didn't have her birthday party. I remember my own children not having birthday parties. We made a big cake for them. We'd tweet out and then people would say, happy birthday, because they knew they couldn't have a party. Why was there one rule for young people across the country who couldn't have birthday parties, for our own Queen and Sovereign who couldn't have a birthday party, but a different situation for Boris Johnson? It's the same drip, 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 and it's happening at a time when people are dealing with a cost of living crisis, energy prices, inflation, and we've got this serious problem in Ukraine. What is going on? Why is he still in office?
This was earlier on in the day. He was given a cake at a school, but when he went back to Downing Street, it was the Cabinet Room, so it was a place of work, and the Chancellor was there as well, so it was a work meeting.
Look, the semantics of this is just so, it's unbearable. It's unbearable. People were putting up with sacrifices. Number 10 should have been all about work. In fact, you know, most of Westminster was very quiet because many people were working from home. There were no other parties in the whole of the Palace of Westminster. There weren't parties here in Sky or any of the other television broadcasters. It just wasn't done. People were taking the rules very, very seriously indeed, except in number 10 Downing Street. That's what happened. And I've got to tell you, we have a tradition in our country that an Englishman's word is his bond. We've had former prime ministers leave office when they've got it wrong. Chamberlain left office when he couldn't unite the country with a unity government. Winston Churchill left office when he felt he was too old and frail. Theresa May left office when she messed up the general election. David Cameron left office because he messed up the referendum. And we still have Boris Johnson in office, despite imposing very tough restrictions on most of the country, laws that he put in place that we all had to live by. And yet we hear week after week after week in these very serious times that there were breaches in his number 10 and he doesn't have to meet those rules. It's totally unacceptable.
Yeah,
either an Englishman's word is worth his bond or not.
But he was, I think he was born in Malta, actually, wasn't he, or somewhere? Anyway, by the by, he set up Sue Gray and the investigation. Surely we have to wait for that.
Look, he should have gone weeks ago. Frankly, what is Sue Gray investigating? It's clear that there were breaches of the rule. Let's go back on this as well, Sue. Okay. First off, he said.
I would have quite enjoyed investigating this, I have to say.
First off, he said there were no parties. There was no breach of the rules. Then he said, "Oh, I'm furious that there were parties," and Allegra Stratton resigned. Sean Bailey, I think, the Conservative contender, he also resigned from his role in the Greater London Assembly. Then he moved on to, I'm sorry that there were parties and I apologise, but I didn't realise that I was walking into a party and no one told me what the rules were, rules that he made. This just goes on and on. It's unbearable. It's unbearable.
Did anybody who was in the Cabinet Room face a fixed penalty notice?
What I can tell you is that at that time, I had constituents who breached those very same rules, and they were subject to criminal investigation and sometimes criminal prosecution. I had a business shut down because it breached the rules. I had parties shut down by the police because they breached the rules, and young people brought through the courts.
So is that a yes?
Again, why are there rules for my constituents but not for Boris Johnson?
So is that a yes?
Absolutely.
Does that include the Chancellor?
Look, we cannot have a country in which any of us, and that includes me, is above the law. But in this circumstance, the Prime Minister should simply resign, step aside and go and let someone else get on with the job of running this very serious country at this very, very serious time.
Did he mislead Parliament?
He clearly misled Parliament. He clearly misled Parliament. It looks like on more than one occasion.
And what do the rules say if you mislead Parliament?
You should go. It's a very serious business to mislead your colleagues, and even if it's unintentional. As I say, at first he said that there were no parties, and there were parties. So that was misleading Parliament. Then he said he didn't attend any parties, and it's clear that he did attend parties. So it's clear that he misled Parliament.
Okay. We don't have much time left, but I do want to ask you what's happening as far as Ukraine is concerned. I did put it to the Transport Secretary, and he basically said, watching brief at the moment. We've heard from the United States that they've got 8,500 troops on standby. What should we be doing, either as UK troops or in the guise of NATO?
Well, when I was in Kiev a few weeks ago, what was clear is that they want the full diplomatic support of the UK and economic support. And we stand with them with that support. We've got 800 troops in Estonia at the moment. And of course, the Ukrainians were talking about arms and how they can support themselves in the event of an invasion. It was right that the EU yesterday provided them with economic support, and there may be more that we can do in that regard in the coming days. These are very, very serious times. It's hugely important that we stand with our Ukrainian allies, and very important for those countries within NATO that border Ukraine and Russia that are very, very worried, because what this represents is a sort of expansionist Putin.
Sure, but it doesn't really
threatens
help.
the sovereignty of countries around him.
What do you think of the rhetoric, though, from the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK, who was sat just there a couple of weeks ago talking about being on the edge of the Third World War? I mean, that sort of rhetoric doesn't help.
Look, I think that we have seen expansionist ideals in Europe before, and it's important to understand that at the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Berlin Wall, that Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. And it gave up those nuclear weapons in return for its independence, its sovereignty, and the support of its neighbours. And Vladimir Putin is breaching that with that incursion on the eastern side of Ukraine, the annexing of Crimea, and now with amassing troops along the borders of the country. He is breaching that, and it's important that the West and allies respond to that with strength and are absolutely clear there will be severe consequences.
But words have consequences, and we need to be careful with the rhetoric.
We want to dial down the rhetoric. We want de-escalation. But in the end, dialogue must continue. That de-escalation must be Putin stepping back from what appears to be an escalation of troops, because it is his intention to invade that country.
Or else what?
Well, we've said that there would be very severe sanctions. Sanctions would damage economic sanctions would damage the Russian economy greatly. Growth in Russia last year was 0.3%. It was 2.3% globally. So Russia has already been hurt by sanctions. This would go much further, cutting Russia out of the SWIFT economic system, causing real problems.
Banking system where you can move
the banking system where you can move money around. Their currency, the ruble, has already fallen overnight. It will fall further. And there are things that they require, like semiconductors, that we could impose sanctions as well. So all of that would cause damage to them, But
they've also got gas that we
yes,
need,
of
and our
course.
fuel bills are already astronomical.
Absolutely, no one doubts that sanctions don't hurt those imposing them as well. But you impose them because you believe that it's a price worth paying, and it must be the case that the democracy and sovereignty of the Ukrainians is worth us giving them that support.
Mr. Lammy, we must leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.